Pete Hegseth woke up this morning and decided to hold a press conference on the United States strikes in Iran, likely after Donald Trump urged him to because of the media reporting that the United States strikes on Iran were not as successful as people thought they were. And while this morning, Pete Hegseth came out and said that President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history. The only issue is that Hegseth wouldn't answer specific questions about whether or not enriched uranium was actually moved from the sites, and that statement discounts operations like the landing at Normandy on D Day or the killing of Osama bin Laden, which arguably were both more secretive and more complex than the operation in Iran. Donald Trump, meanwhile, is now claiming that the New York Times and CNN will soon fire the reporters who broke the story that the Iranian nuclear sites were not completely obliterated and that Iran's nuclear sites were only set back a few months. He's saying that, quote, rumor is that the failing New York Times and fake news CNN will be firing the reporters who make up the fake stories on the Iran nuclear sites because they got it so wrong. Let's see what happens. If CNN and or the New York Times fires any reporter who reported on the intelligence assessment that showed that the United States strikes were not as successful as Trump is claiming, well, that'll make clear that the country is one step closer toward authoritarianism. Now, before I continue, please consider subscribing to my Substack by clicking the button below or sending a one-time donation via Venmo to support my work to Aaron-Parnas. Your subscriptions and donations make this work possible. Now, there is no issue other than immigration that really breaks through to the American people. No other issue like immigration. And right now, a new Wired investigation based on 911 call data and public records reveals a disturbing rise in medical emergencies, including pregnancy complications, suicide attempts, and allegations of sexual abuse at ICE detention centers across the country. Many facilities feel overwhelmed, understaffed, and unequipped to handle urgent care needs, reflecting systematic delays, overcrowding, and deteriorating conditions worsened by ICE's expansion and relocation of detainees to remote areas with limited medical infrastructure. Now, according to the Migrant Insider, all the new House Homeland Security Appropriations bill will require non-detained migrants entering the United States to wear a GPS monitoring device so that the Department of Homeland Security can track their location. And when Donald Trump took office back in January, about ICE detained and arrested 10.3 immigrants with criminal convictions for every one immigrant with no criminal record. Currently, that ratio has dropped to just 1.2 immigrants with criminal convictions for every one immigrant with no record. ICE arrested Ribvar Karimi, a Trump supporter who was an Iranian immigrant and a former Iranian army sniper, during a mass roundup of Iranians following Trump's strikes on Iran nuclear sites, despite his wife's claim that they were finalizing paperwork and that his military service had been disclosed to the United States Department of Homeland Security. ICE cited a visa violation and highlighted his Army ID, while DHS said that he was, quote, removable under the law. Sejun Park, a 55-year-old U.S. Army veteran and Purple Heart recipient who immigrated from South Korea at the age of 7, was forced to self-deport this week after a federal removal order was entered against him. He was wounded in Panama in 1989, received a Purple Heart for his service in the U.S. Army, later struggled with undiagnosed PTSD and drug use following an honorable discharge. U.S. Health Secretary RFK Jr. announced that the United States will halt contributions to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, until, quote, re-earns the public trust. Attorney General Pam Bondi claimed ignorance of reports showing ICE agents hiding their faces with masks during undocumented immigrant roundups, despite widespread evidence. Today, U.S. senators will be meeting with top national security officials from the Trump administration concerning the strikes in Iran. The people that'll be attending: Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense; Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State; John Ratcliffe, the CIA Director; General Dan Kane, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But you know who won't be attending, who was supposed to be attending? Tulsi Gabbard. It appears as though Tulsi Gabbard is on the outs in this administration. Iran's supreme leader declared the country delivered a, quote, heavy slap to the United States, claiming victory in his first remarks since the ceasefire. He also claimed or threatened further action against the United States, claiming the country has access to, quote, key U.S. bases in the region and can strike, quote, whenever it deems necessary. Iran's parliament, on its part, approved a bill to suspend cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog, stating that Iran would accelerate its civilian nuclear program. Trump announced that the United States will hold talks with Iran next week with the possible agreement on Tehran's nuclear program on the table. And finally, a federal judge or federal jury has awarded $500,000 to the widow and estate of a Metropolitan police officer who died by suicide 9 days after defending the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Folks, that's all the news this morning. We'll see what the news brings us today. I'll provide you updates every step of the way. Subscribe to my Substack to support by clicking the button below, and I'll see you this evening.